This is an SM Media production.
Hi, folks, and welcome to the latest episode of Chronicle, the Rangers' journey, right here on SM Media. I'm Scott McPike. It's an absolute pleasure to be your host, as always. We are now in the final quarter with 5 episodes left, but this is one where I feel we get some buzz back after what's been a weird few weeks in the channel where we've looked at some dark days. As we look now, we're going to look into this era of Mark Warburton. Shorter than probably a lot of people thought it would be, but it's very eventful, as we'll soon find out in this show. To join me in this part of the journey, it's a pleasure to welcome David Marshall. David, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you on.
No, I'm glad to be here, mate. I'm looking forward to this. It's a bit of an up and down show, shall we say?
Aye, I mean it's different than the last couple of weeks. A couple of weeks we focused a lot on the boardroom side of it, and as people remember last week, there was a lot to get through. But this summer, before we obviously get into the appointment, it did feel as if the off-field chaos had calmed down.
Yeah, well, this is the point. What was it? March of
Yeah.
2015 when Dave King and co wrestled control back the club from the Swivs. So it felt for the first, excuse me, the first time since everything that happened in 2012 that we actually had a chance to rebuild the club. And I think that's really where we were at this point. We were at a rebuilding stage everywhere in the club, from the off-field stuff to certainly on the field, coming off a very disappointing season the year before, finishing third in the championship, which, I mean, even if we're going through, was still unthinkable at the start going into that season, being embarrassed in the playoffs, and the absolute fiasco it was the Motherwell game. Just, every kick that we could receive at that point, we were taking, and then some. So yeah, particularly these early stages of the Walton era, it was nice not having to worry about the people who were running your club, and for the first time in a long time, it looked like we actually had some direction.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. I think it just brought a bit of stability that was badly needed. I
Mhm.
thought you'd, for the first time in a long, long time, you actually had Rangers people who wanted the best for Rangers. And
Yeah.
I think as well, we will go through obviously the kind of appointment of Warburton, but if you remember at the time, do you remember at the time maybe there've been whispers about other managers, because Ian Cathro seemed to be somebody that was mentioned. I know later on we've heard about likes of Vitor Pereira, but what was your kind of thoughts about the managerial situation at that point?
I think, this is certainly the guy I wanted. I think the majority of the Rangers fans wanted Warburton, certainly from what I remember at the time, because, we knew what he'd done down in England to this point. I was an exciting young manager. His teams played a good brand of football. He had a record of working with and bringing through youth players, and that would certainly, the plan I imagine, would be that would have helped us on the off-field side of things as well. We could develop some players and get a wee bit of money for them. Um, yeah, I don't remember too many more of the names that were floating around at that point. I think, certainly my mind was this was a guy. Absolutely delighted when he was appointed, particularly bringing Davy Weir
Yeah.
and with him. It seemed to be the right move, and it was an exciting one. Honestly, it was the most exciting managerial appointment that we'd made since Advocate. I mean, that's a little bit of hindsight, because PLG was very exciting when he first came in, but that that turned sour fairly quickly. But no, I think this was the right appointment. I think it was the appointment the vast majority of the fans wanted. It just seemed to be a no-brainer at the time.
And he spoke very well as well. We came in the press conference, as you said, we're next to him. I think when the on-field stability was there when we came in, because it was a club legend, somebody who'd been there in the good times, somebody just coming in to help Warburton, who obviously had done really well at Brentford. But the weird parochial way of Scottish football that you usually need a kind of Scottish guy next to you for help. I think
Yeah,
Gerrard
you
learned
need
that as
somebody that
well.
gets it.
Yeah, and Gerrard can add that as well with McAllister, kind of later on, like somebody there just to kind of help you get it. And as I say, I think Warburton was the right appointment at the time. It made a lot of sense. His pedigree spoke for itself. He had a really good attitude of bringing young players through with the next gen series. He'd worked wonders at Brentford, and it seemed to fit. And we'll get into looking at some of his signings. There was a lot of signings here that you thought at the time made a lot of sense. A lot of young players as well. Danny Wilson coming back was the first one. Danny Wilson was only 23 at this point. That was crazy to me at the time, thinking like he's still really young.
Yeah, I'm the same age as Danny Wilson. So yeah, that was again, that was one that seemed to make a lot of sense. If memory serves me, it was a free. He signed for a year at Hearts and capped them to the Championship title the year before against us. Had a great season there. Looked to really be finding his form again, maybe showing some of that promise that he did early on at Rangers before his career was absolutely hit a brick wall when he moved to Liverpool. So yeah, it seemed like a really good signing for us. Made a lot of sense, and particularly Danny Wilson was Davy Weir's boy. The two of them playing together and Weir just telling Wilson what to do. That just seemed to again just make a lot of sense.
The next three signings from Wigan, equaling 600 grand. Rob Kiernan, Martin Waghorn, and James Tavernier. It's safe to say that 600,000 has went particularly well now in 2022, looking back at one player in particular. But at the time, three young players from England, it made a lot of sense. And obviously one of those players has went on to have a magnificent time in his spell at Rangers.
Yeah, the boy Tav has done no bad, it has to be said. He's put a turn in for Rangers over the last 7 years now, my God. Yeah, I can't say I knew an awful lot about any of them prior to signing for Rangers, but it did seem to be the right kind of signings, particularly when you compare it to what we'd been seeing in the McCoist era, and it was a lot of old faces. Or it's funny, I've just literally finished recording the Ali show with Heart and Hand before I did this, and I used the phrase, if you played in the SPL at that point in 2009, we'd probably end up signing you. So it was good to see somebody that hadn't played in the SPL before, hadn't played for us before, and yeah, we're young signings. And at the time, I think the most excitement was around Martin Waghorn. He also hit the ground running as well. So yeah, it looked to be going in the right direction.
Yeah, and there's some other good signings as well. Wes Fodring will come in, Andy Halliday, Jason Holt, Nathan Adua, who had an amazing trick and was never seen again. But again, that was obviously something different to what we thought. But the transfer window, even at the time, you thought this is the right transfer window because, as you say, 2 seasons before, we're talking about Lee Robinson, Steve Simonson, Richard Foster, and things like that. So it was refreshing to see this kind of crop of young players coming through. And as we said earlier on, Warburton had a history with that, so it seemed to make a lot of sense, and it was all about promotion. That was the only prerogative that season, wasn't it?
It had to be. It really had to be. I jumped a wee bit ahead of here, but like the first game against Hibs in the Challenge Cup, and Hibs actually go 1-0 up in that game. And I remember just this sense of dread, because it was just, if this doesn't work, what do we do? Like if we have another season like we did the year before, what happens here? What's the answer to fix this? So yeah, promotion was the absolute. It had to be this year. It would have been an absolute disaster for the club financially. That could have led to some very, very tricky times for us. But it had to be. We should never have been in this situation in the first place. We were having to have a second shot at the Championship, but we needed to get out of this division and end our jail sentence in the lower leagues.
Before we get into talking about the season on the park, there is a couple of things we obviously need to touch on off the park that were taking place. The EGM in June had obviously brought up the thing about Sports Direct and Mike Ashley, and it showed you just how bad some of the contract Rangers were in at that point were absolutely insane. But the Sports Direct one's obviously one that was the kind of most noticeable one. Ashley had the Rangers board under a barrel, didn't he?
We were being ran by absolute charlatans who were selling everything that wasn't bolted down. If Charles Green could get £1 for selling a spoon from one of the hospitality suites, he would have done it. And that Sports Direct deal was to the benefit of one person, and it was to Mike Ashley, and it's, you know, the consequences of it we're still feeling to this day. You know, we're recording
Yeah.
this in the week where the club have just been fined for the fixed shots penalty. You know, again, in a club like ours in 2012, where we need absolutely every financial revenue going for us to sell away our merchandise rights for years to get, you know, pennies to the pound. If anyone was running the club with any good intentions towards Rangers, that's a deal that wouldn't have got past, you know, the first phase of thinking.
And that's why I think, like, we're, as you say, we're recording this just when the kind of current board are coming in for a bit of stick. But when you look at some of the bad things that were going on, particularly we spoke about it last week in great detail about some of the bad contracts that were going on. The board went in and were horrified at what they were finding, and this kind of stuff was why, like, I think it was something was at 30 pence, and every £30 was going towards a shot. Like if you bought something for £30 in the shop, you were getting 30 pence of it was going to Rangers. That's insane. That, as you say, that does not get signed if you're a Rangers person. That's for the benefit of one man. But it just showed you how bleak that situation was, and I think as well, King and the guys there deserve so much credit because they had to fight their socks off to get out of these deals, didn't they?
Absolutely. The board who came in 2015, you know, putting aside any current day situations or infighting that's currently going on, which I frankly get bored of, to be quite honest. You know, what the men did in 2015, you know, we should be eternally grateful for.
Yeah.
They saved the club. We were going in one direction under those people. I remember the EGM before this. I think it was either in January 2015 or December 2014, and when it was you remember the tent on the pitch,
Yes.
and it had the fans at the side of on the corner on the govern stand in the pissing rain, and the board were literally sneering and laughing at the support who were absolutely enraged that day, and you know they were beyond hiding it at that point. You know, they had nothing but contempt for us. They did not give one iota for the club. They were there to pillage Rangers and make out with what they could.
And obviously, as well, the other thing that was going on around about this point that kind of dragged on for a while was the trial involving the previous administration. Craig White's trial was beginning to kind of develop. It doesn't actually close for another couple of years, so it does just carry on. But quickly, let's just get it out of the way. The whole period, just it was a not guilty verdict. We obviously won't go into a lot of it because we can have our theories at what actually happened, but this whole thing was just because the situation on the park had improved, and it was nice to have something to distract you. But every day you were hearing other crazy things coming out of this trial. It was just weird and something I never ever thought would happen with the owner of Rangers Football Club, and it just showed you how poisonous this whole situation was.
I mean, Craig White was the fall guy for Charles Green. I think that's became very clear over the years that, like, Green had his fingers in this from the very beginning. Just a scumbag of a man. If I could get 5 minutes alone in a room with Charles Green, Craig White, and David Murray, I'd be a very happy man. I would never ask for anything else for the rest of my life.
And it's that thing as well, isn't it? Like, now you can look back and laugh, but at the time it was just horrendous, wasn't it? Like, maybe not so much
every single day, you know,
Aye.
it just seemed to be something else popping up, and it was just it was just so tiring. It was draining. It was depressing. And you know, I remember a Heart and Hand episode at the time, not to plug much stuff. I wasn't with the pod at this point. I actually remember to listen to a show at the time on my way to work, and I was working a job I fucking hated at that point as well. So just everything was just awful. And I remember I think it was around the time of the 10 EGM, and one of the guys in the show, might be David, might be somebody else, said that we're just another club in blue at this point. And I just remember feeling this pit in my stomach, because that's exactly what we were. There was nothing about Rangers at that point apart from the support that looked like Rangers.
No. And as you say, we spoke last week as well. I have strong belief that gazebo was stolen from a scout hall or something, because there's no way that just showed you. Even that was in the cheap. Even the EGM was just the lowest they could get. It was just grim. And again, we won't get into too much detail regarding this trial, but I am glad to get this period over and focusing on field stuff, because the beginning of the Warburton era, 11 straight victories, as you say, that magnificent win against Hibs, where it just seemed to click and very early on. And this is why I always have a lot of respect for Warburton. And we'll touch a bit later on how it ended, because we were seeing the on-field stuff was so poor. And to be honest, it was at the back of your mind for so long. So for this guy to come in and really bring his own methods in and bring a real spark back to the club that we hadn't seen for so long.
Yeah. You know, it was nice to see us play football again. You know, it was nice to see us go out and, you know, not try and shut up 1-0 up against Forfar or the like, you know, and playing five defenders or a centre mid in defence just to get them in the team at some point. It was a total breath of fresh air. It was what we really needed. We needed to enjoy going to watch our team again, because those years beforehand, you know, it wasn't enjoyable. You were going because you went, and that's what you did. You went and watched Rangers regardless. But God, the football got in the way of, you know, of the day out of a Saturday of seeing your mates and getting a drink. The 90 minutes at Ibrox or whatever was just something you had to endure. So actually being able to go along to the games and enjoy it was nice.
It was a breath of fresh air. And you could see early on that Warburton, that his plan was to play football. I've said before about Warburton, this whole period just showed that when Rangers want to, they can play some magnificent stuff. And some of the passing, some of the movement was just terrific. Like Tavernier and Wallace in particular, bombing forward. It was so refreshing.
It was, yeah, and I think, you know, you can't sum up any better than breath of fresh air. And it was to see these young, exciting players come into the team, taking on teams that we knew we were much better than, and treat them like such, and playing in a style that was enjoyable to watch. You know, this is how it should have been from the start when we started in the Division 3. But you know, for better or worse, or for whatever reasons, it wasn't. But we really needed this at this point. We needed something to, you know, to lift us as a sport, because we've been browbeaten, you know, it's into the ground. You know, just when you think that we couldn't take any more kicks in the balls, there was another one round the corner waiting for us. I don't know if there was another support in the world that could survive what we went through. I don't know how we did it myself, quite frankly. It'll be something that in years to come, when I'm much older, and I've said this a few times, I can't wait till I'm like 60 at Ibrox and we're having a particularly bad season or whatever, and there's a young guy sitting beside me that goes, "This is the worst Rangers team ever." I said, "Oh, hold on there, let me tell you." So, but no, this was, you know, to put it really simply, this was good.
Yeah, it was good, and it was a really good win and run. Everything seemed to be kind of better on the park, but Rangers come up against St Johnstone in the League Cup quarter-final. I fancied Rangers this day. I thought they would show it. I didn't think St Johnstone were anything to write home about. But Michael O'Halloran turned into Erling Haaland for a night. And that was a weird night, wasn't it? Because O'Halloran did actually have a good game and ended up probably getting his move because of this game. And that didn't work either.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, again, hindsight's 2020, but you could maybe make the argument that this was the first sign of, you know, some of the weaknesses in Warburton as a manager that would come to bite us later on in his tenure. It was, you know, I'll be honest, I expected us to win that night as well. You know, after a good start, I thought we might have a chance at one of the cups this season. Obviously, we go on and get to the final of the Scottish Cup, and that ended how it ended. But yeah, it was, you know, a wee reminder that maybe we're not as far ahead as we thought, because, you know, there was talk in the hubris of going, this team could win the SPL, never mind the championship. But no, he showed that there was still a fair bit to go.
There was, and I just remember
The
that
thing
night.
at that point was, though, that was still in the future, so there was time to improve in that.
Yeah, but as you say, it kind of brought up this weird thing that I think we had in the back of our mind as well, early at that point, because there was a lot of goals Rangers were scoring, but they're also conceding a few here and there, and they were really dodgy goals. But I remember that night, I think Rob Keelan had an absolute stinker, and it did, as you say, it did open up this wee thing that maybe defensively Rangers aren't great at this point.
Yeah, you could go back to the first league game against St Mirren, like we were 2-0 up and dominant. They get a goal from nothing, and I think that Stephen Thompson missed a penalty late on it 2-2, and we managed to get a third late on. But that game totally dominant. If Thompson doesn't blast his penalty over the bar, could have been different. So again, this is very much in hindsight, but the warning signs were there early on. What was a weakness early on never really improved.
No, it didn't improve, and I remember. Look, as you say, you kind of think before we kind of went into great detail in this kind of research and things like that. I thought this season was I thought it just went well and just kept going. But there was a bad wee run between November and Christmas where I remember that Hibs game actually being a really bad result. But then later on, I remember a really bad performance against Falkirk, a 2-1 defeat. And there was that Hibs game in Christmas felt massive because it was a really poor run from November to just after Christmas.
Yeah, that I'm just trying to remember. I think if Hibs won that, they went ahead of us that day, did they not?
They did, yeah. I think there was only 2 points going into that game, yeah.
Yeah, I've just brought up there, yeah. So we won that to go. They were sorry, I think they were 3 points behind going into it, so it made things even as it was. But yeah, I mean that was a huge game again, because you get to that point in the season, as you said, we started off really well, but then going through this sticky patch, and Hibs himself had been on a really good run. Like Jason Cummins was, he was really turning it up for Hibs that season. Also, they go in front as well. That was a massive game, and I think you've seen that within the atmosphere. That was probably the best atmosphere we had at Ibrox for the entire time.
Yeah.
And the low league, the lower league. Sorry, I think this is probably, out with the Celtic semi-final. This is probably the best game of that tenure because it meant it was a big game. It actually meant something, and we had too many games throughout this period that didn't matter.
Yeah.
Or we got to the point where we did play the big games in the cup, and inevitably we would, make a fool of ourselves. But this was a big game where we had to show up, and we actually did.
Yeah, and as you say, it starts a 10-game unbeaten run, apart from a wee blip against Alloa, but the league was kind of going smoothly as well. There was some tight 1-0 wins in there as well. We think it like I really remember Billy King's last minute goal against Falkirk.
Yeah.
Like there was they were getting the job done. The football was good, but again there was some tight games, and it showed you that it was just they were getting back to where they wanted to be. And do you remember that really bad game against Falkirk where they were 2-0 up and lost 3-2? That was a weird. I remember watching that in a pub in Ayr, I think, and that was a weird.
Was that the one with the penalty that was about a good 2 yards outside the box?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. But Rangers had went 15 games unbeaten in the league before then, so the form was really good getting into that game. So that did obviously feel like a bit of a blip because 20 minutes to go, Rangers were 2 up and ended up losing 3-2. But it brought up these wee frailties again that this team did have.
It was, that's the thing looking back in this season. As you said, your mind plays tricks and you think that we just steamrolled this season, but particularly after Christmas, once we got a good position in the league, the foot, came off the gas a wee bit, and a lot of games we were just doing enough to get by, but we were getting by, and I think the team and the manager at this point had a little bit of the credit in the bank, and the fact that we were going so well in the Scottish Cup helped him with that as well. But again, there were signs there.
There were signs there, and the Scottish Cup run as well. Now, we argued last week in the show that Rangers had been really poor in all domestic outings in the cups, even the Challenge Cup as well. But they were performing well in the cup. They beat Kilmarnock in a replay, a last minute goal from Nicky Clark, and then that game against Dundee, where Harry Forrester scored after 15 seconds in a 4-0 win. And it set up this semi-final at Hampden against Celtic. Now, we spoke about it last week. I remember the season before that, absolutely terrified actually when that game started against Celtic, when under Kenny McDowell, where I think Kenny McDowell was similar to all of us. He knew it was coming, but there was something different about getting the build up to this Celtic game, because it felt as if Celtic weren't brilliant. This wasn't a vintage Celtic team,
No.
but Rangers were on the up.
Yeah, I mean, that Celtic team weren't a great Celtic team by any stretch of the imagination. You know, Ronnie Dyler basically got handed whatever it was, 3 league titles or whatever he won when we were out the league, and you know, even so, we still managed to cost another Celtic manager his job with this result. But it did feel different. You know, I went into this one very confident. I genuinely thought that we could get something. I think they kind of felt it as well, you know, because in the games before this that they had it so easy against us. You know, that one would only beat us 2-0 and really took pity on us. That was just as bad as almost as any of the Mullins would receive in the following seasons. But yeah, this felt different, and I think you could tell straight from the start that, you know, all the players in the park on both sides knew that this was a totally different beast to what came before. We were right up for it. We're in loads of confidence. We looked like we thought we were going to win that day.
Yeah. And it was a thrilling tussle. Kenny Miller gave Rangers a lead early on, a really good goal. Sviatchenko drew Celtic level. It went to extra time. And it was a weird thing as well that I thought extra time Rangers were the fitter team. Now, that we hadn't said that for 3 seasons before, that Rangers were fit. There was something different about the team in a fitness sense as well. Mackay with that really good goal. And then Rogic, I think this was his first goal against Rangers, and he pops up again in the next couple of weeks as well. But going to penalties, it's a lottery, but I just thought Rangers were always going to win it. I just thought Rangers it was Rangers' day, and it felt like it. And how big was that result? Because, as you say, the 4 years of misery that off on the field obviously was poor, but it felt like Rangers fans were rubbing Celtic's faces in it just because of how weird Celtic fans had behaved. This just felt massive for Rangers and Rangers fans. This was a big day.
It was huge. You know, it's still, for me, it's the greatest old fun victory ever, because it will never happen again. You know, you'll never have a lower league Rangers side going up against Celtic, or a lower league Celtic side going up against Rangers. This can't be topped. It can't be matched. This is a complete one-off that we'll never see again. And yeah, as I said, I was confident going into the game. I remember watching this one in the Masonic in Linwood and being very confident. When we get the first goal, go 1-0 up. You look at the 2 goals Celtic scored, and again, defensively, you know, as good as we were that game, we were poor at their 2 goals. The second one, particularly Rodgers one, we made it, you know, very easy, which was really frustrating when you go into extra time and you get the goal go ahead and you give away such an easy goal. But I don't know if I was as confident going into penalties. Frankly, I felt sick. You know, I was so proud of the team for the performance they put in to get to that point. It would have still been a massive kick in the gut to lose it from there. And particularly when we miss the first penalty, I think, oh, surely not. But when we won it, I just remember the place going absolutely mental. You know, roof getting blown off the pub. That was an all-nighter, I can assure you. And yeah, it was huge at the time. You know, my thoughts at that point were, this is it, Rangers are back. And that would prove to be somewhat premature. But now, you know, we're nearly 7 years on from that game, which is incredible in itself to say. You could take it in isolation and just enjoy it for what it was, because it was huge at the time. Because if nothing else, it was a moment of relief. We, as the support, we deserved this for everything we went through, and just for, you know, even just for the one day, just to give them a reminder, like, remember who we are. We will be back for you. Don't worry.
And that was the thing as well. As you say, it felt like that moment for that you've been screaming out for the 4 years, because I think you've summarised it well. It was a jail sentence, but you wanted something from that 3 years, or 3 years we thought, but it would turn out to be 4. What a memorable result against a Celtic. Something that you can look back in that period and go, right, this was the achievement of that period, because it was grim. It was a grim period, but you had that Celtic result, and this felt like that. This felt like the reward for that kind of grim period. And it would turn out to be the last win of that season.
Yeah.
Rangers, they'd won the week before the Challenge Cup. Again, I don't think you would have said to anybody that Rangers would have won 1 Challenge Cup out of 4. But was there warning signs in that period from the 17th of April? Rangers would go to Hibs, lose 3-2, draw 1-1 with Alloa, 1-0 defeat to Livingston away, and then 2-2 at home to St Mirren. The league was wrapped up. Rangers were back in the Premiership, but Rangers were playing the 1st of May and wouldn't have the cup final against Hibs until the 21st. But in hindsight, it's a wonderful thing. Rangers were not going into that cup final in good form.
No, we weren't. I'll be honest, even at the time, I was a bit worried going into that game. I gave the players a bit of slack because we got the league. We got the league wrapped up, and I think, naturally the foot came off the gas a wee bit. But I still expected us, to do enough to grind out a few wins. My worry going into that final was, and it's something that we'd seen under Ali McCoy's, we'd hoped that, as poor as we are in these league games, when we played the cup games and, when it matters, we'll turn it on. And you can't do that. You can't just turn it on like a switch because this game matters.
Mm-hmm.
You need to have, the momentum behind you. And we didn't have, we honestly, maybe I think, as a support, we were still flying off the Celtic result. But, as a team, we didn't have any momentum. As you said, it'd been a long time since we'd actually won a game. That Challenge Cup game, you said, was the last game that we'd win in 90 minutes. Yeah. So I'm not going to say I didn't think we'd win the cup final. I did. I thought we'd win it. But yeah, there was a wee bit of worry there just because of how stagnant we'd been since we got things wrapped up elsewhere.
And the cup final's a weird day as well. We'll touch on the aftermath in a minute, but the game as a whole, Hibs took the lead really on through Anthony Stokes. Miller equalised. Halliday put Rangers 2-1 in front, which felt like the Rangers have went behind. They'll come back and win the game. But Stokes equalises with 10 minutes to go. And then a 92nd minute corner from David Gray seals Hibs' first win in the Scottish Cup in 117 years. But this in the day felt like a gut punch because I think that it was the trophy. It felt like a trophy, and going into that game, it felt like, right, we'll get a trophy. We're going up. This will be the reward for that period, and it was just a weird day.
Yeah, I mean, it'd have been a great way to round off that era, and again give a signal to the rest that we're back. To be perfectly honest, if Rangers won that day, it'd have been daylight robbery. We didn't deserve to win. That was far and away our worst performance of the season. Hibs deservedly were in front. Anthony Stokes absolutely terrorised Rob Kiernan that game. That first goal, I can't think about it without getting angry. I think Rob Kiernan backed away so much. He was in the last row of the Rangers end behind the goal. By the time Stokes actually puts the ball in the net, it was just awful defending. The fact we managed to get 2-1 in it, I thought we would go on to win from there because I thought Hibs would. I actually thought we'd go on to win for there and maybe score another goal because I thought Hibs will need to come out now and we should be able to pass around them and pick them off and get another goal to seal it. Just didn't happen. Andy Hardy scores a wonder goal, and I think that was the only way we were going to get ahead in that game. It's a great goal by Halliday, and then nothing in the game really changes from there. Rangers still are awful. Hibs are still taking the game to us, and a failure to deal with 2 corners cost us. Yeah,
and it was a symbol of that game. But Rangers had lost the Scottish Cup, but after the game will probably be remembered more than the actual game. What was your kind of thoughts in the post-match melee that resulted in a pitch invasion by Hibs fans that I can only describe as Hibs fans goading the Rangers fans to come up?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I didn't know much about it at the time. I said I wasn't at the final that day. I just watched it in the pub, and we turned the telly off in the pub almost soon as the game was finished. And then, people are starting to hear us come through on their phones. Oh, there's trouble at the game. We switch it back on, and I think by that point, the police had got everyone sorted and got the very least got Hibs fans back in their own half. Yeah, I mean, the Hibs fans ran onto the park and up to the Rangers end to goad the Rangers support, and they got a reaction. I'm not saying that's right.
Yeah.
But if you goad people you don't, and particularly people you don't know, if you're going to goad strangers, then you have no control over that reaction. And if you go to me, I'm just going to leave. But if you go to some big burly cunt, he might run on the park and smack you, and that's what happened. Was what it was. If it was the other way around, and we won that day, and we did what Hibs fans did, you would never hear the end of it.
No, you would not. And it's as I say, it was just one of those weird things that happens. And again, it only seems to happen in Scottish football, and it doesn't seem to be kind of brought up again. But going into the summer, obviously Rangers were going back up to the Premiership. It felt like the jail sentence was over. Across the city, Celtic had obviously smartened up. I think the defeat to Rangers in the Cup had maybe not smartened them up, but I think they'd certainly wanted a reaction. They went and hired Brendan Rodgers. At the time, what did you think of that when you remember? Obviously, Ronnie Dyer left and Rodgers had come in. Did it feel like this was a statement by Celtic at the time?
Yeah. To be honest, yeah. I mean, you tell yourself all the right things in your head, like, oh, well, he made an arse out of Liverpool. He's not really that good, but this was a guy that was a better manager than playing his trade in Scotland. And my true reaction was, fuck. Maybe if they kept Dyer, I'm not saying we'd have won the league or got anywhere close, but it might have not been to the point of embarrassment that this season turned out to be. But yeah, it was a statement by Celtic, and they spent a good bit of money that summer as well. And just at that point, we had absolutely no way of competing with that.
And going back to that summer, like there was a realistic expectation that I think it was going to take a bit of time for this Rangers team to really get back to where they wanted to be. But I mean, we'll touch on the first game. But the signings of the summer, there's some weird ones here that is maybe a little bit different to where kind of the direction Warburton went in the season before. He brought in the two guys, Mark Stanley, Josh Windass, and Matt Crooks. At the time, these felt like development players. The one signing I was really excited about this summer was Jordan Rossiter. I thought he would, if only he could stay fit, he would have been. He would have made it, wouldn't he? He was the small cameos we saw a decent player there, and he would have done well if he didn't get injured.
If he didn't get injured, he would probably never be at Rangers.
Yeah.
He was at us for a reason, and yeah, he's one of these great footballing tragedies. His body just let him down. He was a cracking player. Football wise, he had all the tools, and if his body could only have stayed fit, he would have been playing at a much higher level in the Scottish Premiership. But it just was what it was. It was just never going to happen for the boy, and it was a shame.
Yeah, I mean, I think particularly if Gerrard had been able to get a tune out of him, I think he would have been a real standout. But
the fact that Gerrard was so hesitant to wash his hands of him, shows you.
Yeah, I think it does, and I think it's a great what if with Jordan Rossiter. But the next one, the kind of the talking signing of the summer was a 33-year-old from Burnley who developed a bit of a reputation. David, is that fair to say before he arrived at Ibrox?
Wee bit of character.
Yes, a wee bit of a character. We are of course talking about the one and only Joey Barton. Joey Barton was spotted in Glasgow. There was a bit of fanfare about whether he was going to sign. He did obviously sign. Hindsight is a wonderful thing, but I remember being really excited about this because I thought, right, this guy's a character. He's going to really be that guy in the midfield that Rangers need. He's going to be a step up. I think it was player of the season before in the Championship. Like, given his character, he is a good player.
He is. I'm not going to say I was excited, but at this point, I was, all in on Warburton. And I think particularly the other signings that he made there as well, they all seem to be, his type of signings.
Mm-hmm.
So it seemed like we had a style and direction and way of recruiting. So to sign, a player like Joey Barton to add to that, okay, I can go with that. And I knew it was always going to go either one or two ways. It was either going to be a great success or a complete disaster. Deep down in my heart, I probably knew it was only going to go one way. But, I was willing to give him a chance because you're right. If it worked, he could be the best player in the country, but it was never going to.
Nah, and we'll touch on later on how it goes. The next one at the time I thought was a weird signing. He probably comes out with more credibility from this transfer window than any other. Clint Hill from QPR, 37. This felt weird because it felt as if it was going against the status quo of a young player.
Yeah.
Clint Hill was 37. I don't ever really think Clint Hill was a top defender in his day. I think he was a serviceable Championship defender. What did you think of this one at the time?
Actually, like Clint Hill's been in our show and stuff. I love Clint as a guy. He's a great guy. But honestly, at the time, I did defend this. I remember having quite a few arguments with my mates about this about why are we signing this 37-year-old defender. And I thought, well, because I was all in on Warburton, I stuck up for it. I thought, well, it's a guy with experience. It's even at this point, this isn't hindsight. We knew there was weaknesses in defence. We knew it was an area that had to be improved going up a division. So he will be good for like Danny Wilson, for Rob Kiernan. I thought, my hope was that we'd have the same effect on Danny Wilson that Davy Weir did playing alongside him. Yeah, I mean, as you said, for most transfers from that summer window, Clint's probably the one that comes out with the most credit. He was certainly nowhere near the worst, but you're right. It did somewhat fly in the face of what we seem to be doing. Yeah. And on looking back on it now, it does seem to be a wee bit of, at the time, just trying to get in who we could. And I think the other centre half we signed probably proved that.
Yeah, I mean, there was talk of Jolie and Lescott. There was even talk of Andrew
Yes,
Mariappa,
I forgot that.
Yeah.
God, yeah, Lescott.
But Philip Senderos was the signing that this just didn't work.
Oh, this is why I knew I was in full delusion mode. I told myself this was going to work as well. I mean, he was a bit of a joke figure come the end when he was at Arsenal, and it just this was when it was just never going to work. But again, you're like, okay, he's very experienced. He's played at a much higher level in Scotland. He should be able to handle it up here. But oh god, the guy was done, and you could make an argument I've ever had it in the first place.
There was one signing that at the time you were thinking, right, he's 31, he's from New York Cosmos. He was obviously a massively good player for Tottenham back in the day. Nico Kranjčar, again, one of those maybe what ifs. Obviously gets injured early on, but he was a top player. He was just obviously coming to the end of his career. But he was 31, so it kind of thought, right, for a couple of seasons he's going to be that playmaker. I thought this did make a bit of sense.
Yeah, no, this was one that I was genuinely excited about because, as you say, he was such a tidy player at Spurs and Portsmouth before that as well. And, one of these guys that can score from anywhere. I was genuinely excited about this one. And, it did come with the caveat of, we can just keep him fit. But, his knees were gone by the time we signed him. Unfortunate, I wish we could have signed him 5 years before this, but he'd never been anywhere near Rangers 5 years before this. So,
no.
Yeah, it just didn't work. Yeah.
Matt Gilks arrived from Burnley, free transfer. He was kind of just covered at the time. There's one signing of this that I didn't get, and even at the time, I've got a lot of friends who are Kilmarnock supporters. I asked them about Lee Hodgson, and they said he was not good enough for Kilmarnock. So I thought, well, he's not going to work at Rangers. Joe Dodo arrived from Leicester again. One of those signings, he was only 21. I thought, a couple of years, he'll be a decent player. Rangers spent 1.8 million that summer on a striker from Preston called Joe Garner. Now he's emerged as a bit of a cult figure. He's obviously song and things like that, and just been a kind of weird kind of cult hero. But was
Slide
he
tackling Christmas trees and the like, yeah.
was he good enough for Rangers, do you think? Like, what did you think of this signing, and how do you think he actually did in his time?
Right, this is one for me where the Joe Garner signing did worry me a wee bit. Because, you asked the question, was he good enough for Rangers? I think the answer to that's no. I mean, I don't think really a lot of the players that we signed at that point were good enough for Rangers, really. But what really troubled me about this one was that he didn't seem to fit into our style of play at all.
That was the thing that worried me as well.
Yeah, because he was like the classic, number 9 striker who worked best with somebody playing alongside him, and that's not how we played. We played 4-3-3 with the one main focal point. That's why the roles at the role at Wagner and Miller would swap out with each other for the previous season. So yeah, this one just didn't make sense to me, and it seemed to be if we're bringing in a Joe Garner, you're bringing in Joe Garner and you're building the team around him. You're not bringing him in to fit in our system, which is what we did. And I just don't know why we signed this guy. It just didn't seem to fit us at all.
Nah, I think that's what worried me as well. It didn't seem to fit, and it was just a weird signing. And see Joe Garner maybe now, like a player, maybe a better type of Joe Garner would make a lot of sense. But at the time, it just didn't seem to fit Warburton's plan. I just didn't get it.
I think in the most obtuse way, comparing them to somebody like Antonio Cholak now, I had the same worries when Cholak signed for Rangers. Yeah. The fact that, I don't think he fits into our style of play. I'm not entirely sure still now that he does, but the difference is that Cholak's just a quality player, and the way you fit him into your system is just give him the ball in the box and let him do what he does. But Joe Garner is nowhere near as good a player as Antonio Cholak is.
No, and he's not that clinical goal scorer, because the one thing this Rangers team did, they would make chances, but a lot of the time they would not take them. And we'll talk about this in the next few minutes, where the league starts with that Hamilton game, and it felt big at the time. It was. And Warburton said this as well, and this is what I was keen to get your thoughts on. He said in an interview that his heart sunk when he walked out that tunnel and he saw the going for 55 banner in the stand. What do you think of that when you hear him say that he even felt that the fans' expectations of that season were so far away from what he thought?
See, the going for 55 stuff annoyed me. Because, regardless, even at this point, we might not have thought it was possible, but any Rangers team in the top league, they aim is to win the league. Yeah. That's just the way of it. I can understand Warburton's frustration to that, because, he's right. The team was at nowhere near at a point that we were going to win the league. The club itself tried to backtrack on that, later in the season, saying that we were still off it. And I was like, no, but hold on a second. Yous were the one that came up with the going for 55 slogan, and we're selling season tickets off the back of that. Yeah. Yous that came up with this, and now you're telling the fans to temper their expectations. That's a wee bit having your cake and eating it for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Again, we were nowhere near being able to win the league that season. But for him to come out and say that his heart sunk when he saw that, surely he must understand, though, that the expectations at Rangers are to win everything regardless. I said we were in the 3rd division and still thought, we might have a chance at winning the Scottish Cup or the League Cup. That's just the way of it. When you're the Rangers, you're expected to win and win every week, regardless of the quality of the team. He must have known that was still going to be there, and as much as the fans can reason with themselves, and you go well, maybe no this year, when it gets right down to it and the games are starting, we're still expecting to win every single game.
And I sort of see that side of it, but you know as well as I do that we live in the period of Rangers Twitter. We can agree it's a weird thing.
absolutely.
Can you imagine Mark Warburton coming out in a press conference like the day before that game saying our aim is to finish comfortably second? Can you imagine how that? Because that clearly was what he wanted. That clearly is what his expectations were. Because if his heart sunk when he said going for 55, then his aim wasn't to win the league; it was to probably finish second. But can you imagine if he'd come out and said that?
And there must have been a reason why he never said that, because he knew it wouldn't fly.
Exactly. So, what do you do there though? Do you go over your own? Do you go against your own expectations and come out and say things that you know you don't really believe, or do you go with it and just hope that you've got enough credibility in the bank that that the Rangers fans are going to get behind you? It's a weird situation, but I think Warburton just didn't get that side of it, and I don't think he was clear enough in himself with that.
Mm-hmm. I think that is one of the main things, that he didn't get it, and that was really disappointing at the time to realise, because I think we all thought that he did get it, and the guy was a winner, and I don't know. I think the fact that his managerial career hasn't exactly skyrocketed since he left Rangers. We probably overinflated him, overestimated him as a manager. I still think he's a fantastic coach, and
I think the job he's in now is probably what he should be doing.
Yeah, a fantastic developer of young players and whatnot. But I don't know, and it was something that really severed over the course of the season as well. You think back to the first season, and you've seen it like online, like every interview, every post-match interview that came out, it was must see. Like fans were chomping at the bit to hear what this guy said. And then as this season goes on and on, you were getting absolutely sick of it and hearing the same sound bites that were just becoming grating. Hearing about, you don't want to lose and then hear about how good our pitch geography was. It's just not going to cut it.
And the start wasn't great. The first 4 games, 2 wins and 2 draws, but the 2 wins were really tight games against Dundee and Motherwell. What was your expectations going into that Celtic game? Was it because I don't remember fearing that game, but I don't think I thought that day a draw would have been a miracle, but it just turned into a really bad day at the office.
I was really worried. I'll be honest. I was really worried going into that Celtic game, because they were flying at that point as well. If I remember correctly, they'd started off really well against Rodgers, and going back to that first league game against Hamilton, and as soon as they like that day, and as soon as they scored, it just seemed to be like the air just left the stadium, and all of the problems that we're experiencing in the second half of the last season, all those little worries were now magnified. It's like, this is a real problem now. I was really worried going into that Celtic game, and they get the quick goals and that. And again, I remember I watched this one in the pub and turned to my uncle at that time and said, "No, this could get really bad today." Got so bad that I was supposed to be working after that game. I got absolutely blind drunk, went into my work and got turned around and told to go straight home, which I was fine with. I went back to the pub to continue to drown my sorrows.
It was a bad day, a 5-1 defeat, and it kind of just highlighted all these bad things that were kind of in the back of your mind. There's still
a wee voice back in my head that says, if Barry Mackay just takes that chance to make it 2 each, you never know.
Exactly, and it's one of those weird things. Well, you look at, remember the Senderos handball and things like that. It was a bad day, but
yeah, he meant that. He wanted off that pitch. Absolutely no doubt. He had no business being there in the first place.
He kind of does this kind of Damian Lillard kind of thing where he just kind of balances it in his hand. He means it, but obviously
nobody knew more than Philip Senderos that he had no business being on that park in that team.
No, absolutely not. But it kind of leads, that result and performance kind of leads to a situation in the training ground. Joey Barton, who certainly hadn't impressed a lot in his 5 games so far. I remember him getting man of the match against Hamilton as well, when I just turned around to the person sitting next to me. I was like, what is he getting man of the match for? But he certainly hadn't set the world on fire. He was coming up saying that he was going to take Scott Brown. Scott Brown said it was easy getting up against him, but the whole situation with the kind of what happens in the training ground now, that the kind of regular belief is, and I don't know if this is the one you've heard as well, that there was certainly a debate started about whether the midfield that day was the right midfield, and I think the three midfielders that weren't playing that day certainly challenged the decision. It turned into a bit of a melee between Barton and Andy Halliday. It just turned into a bad situation, and I think that was what you said earlier about Barton. It was only going to go one of two ways, and from here it was only ever going the way it went.
Yeah, that was the thing with that, the aftermath of that game, and you heard Barton's had a lot of strong words for the team, and when you hear the details come out about it, you're like, well, he's not really saying a lot wrong, but who is he to be saying that? Because
exactly.
he's one of the problems, and you're right, as you said, he comes up here and he's bumping his guns, saying he's going to do this and that to Celtic, to Scott Brown. He's going to be the best player in the country, and like, well, we're sitting here waiting, Joey.
Yeah, and it was that thing as well. Like, although in the back of your mind you thought it could go this way, you wanted it to work because it would benefit Rangers, but it was just a disaster, an absolute disaster. And I think Warburton as well. I think this was a wee alarm bell as well. I don't think Warburton handled this well at all. Like, he didn't come out. Like, can you imagine, like, Walter Smith dealing with that? Walter Smith would have dealt with it. He dealt with Ferguson to a degree where he put his foot down. I don't think Warburton really did here.
No, because it seemed to drag on, and the actual decision, was a bit of a mess, and took its time to come out. I mean, ultimately, he was done after this, but it should have been an immediate thing. Again, it's not really hindsight to say this because we knew this could be happening. It's just something we should never really have signed. He wasn't good for the team. He wasn't good for where the team was. At that point, it's not the kind of character that we needed, and it was really only ever going to go one way.
It was going to go one way. A couple of bad results after that. Ross County 0-0, and then a 2-1 defeat to Aberdeen away. James Maddison scored an injury time free kick, but
it was never a free kick.
It was never a free kick, but I think it was just a weird. That was a weird day. I've watched that now, but it's Baron Benidorm. That was a weird day. The next game I want to talk about is the 23rd October. Rangers play Celtic again at Hampden in the League Cup semi-final. This, to me, felt worse than the 5-1 game, because even though, as you say, that 5-1 game, Rangers, they weren't great, but they were creating a couple of chances. I remember Windass in particular doing okay in that game, Mackay's chance. This semi-final, Rangers offered absolutely nothing. And if it wasn't for Matt Gilks, it would have been an absolute hiding again.
Yeah, this was just a weird day because we offered nothing. We seemed to, I mean, suppose understandably when we've just been spanked with them a few weeks before, but we just tried to sit in and keep Celtic at bay that day. I remember, the one where Barry Mackay went down in the box early on. It looked like the referee gave the penalty initially, and then Craig Thompson, funnily enough, ends up putting Barry Mackay for a dive. Honestly, I can't remember if it was or wasn't a dive. So I'm not really going to see either way. Matt Gilks had a really good game that day. And he scored late on and win the game. Didn't matter when the goal was going to come that day. It felt just inevitable that Celtic were going to end up winning that.
Yeah, and to be fair, league results do get a bit better. There's some wins in there. A 3-0 win against Kilmarnock. The thing that alarms me though is there's a couple of games. A 1-0 win against Dundee, Harry Forrester, a 92nd minute winner. A 2-1 win away to Partick Thistle with a late Joe Doodoo goal.
Yeah,
it wasn't convincing, was it? But they were playing okay, but it wasn't convincing at all. It wasn't what you thought at the start of the season. It was just so much different than what you expected it to be.
Yeah, I mean, you look at that Dundee game. This is a team that we absolutely ran over the top of just a couple of months ago, and now we're scraping by. We're scraping by Partick Thistle. It felt like these wins were just papering over the cracks. There was something seriously broken in the team.
And that would get confirmed in the 30th of November. A 2-0 win, a 2-0 defeat against Hearts. Robbie Muirhead with a double, and Robbie Nielsen's last game before he went to MK Dons. this was there's a Hearts game that we'll touch on in a couple of minutes that's a lot worse than this, but this felt like a terrible night.
This was it for me, to be honest. This is when I went, nah, this isn't going to get any better. We were absolutely rotten that night, absolutely rotten. Barely lay a glove in Hearts. It was probably one of the easiest wins they had all season up until they played us again later on in the season. This was for me when I just thought, nah, I don't think he's going to turn it around. I don't think he's got, because the aim is to get to the point where we're winning leagues again. And I'm just looking at this guy now, thinking, I don't think he's got what it takes to take us to a league title. I don't think we're ever going to get there with him.
Yeah. To be fair, after that, it was a bad night, but Rangers won their next 4 games, a draw against St Johnstone, but it's going into the second Old Firm at Ibrox, the Hogmanay. Rangers take the lead through Kenny Miller. I remember that feeling, just a great feeling, but then after that, Celtic turned on the style. Celtic were pretty good later on that game, but I remember specifically getting home that day and talking to my dad, and my dad said that was probably Rangers at their best against Celtic, and Celtic just, all Celtic had to do was just hit another gear, and it did. The more you think about it, it felt like that, because I think Rangers probably couldn't have got any better that day, and I think Celtic they could put it up just to whatever level they wanted to.
I think that sums it up perfectly. In that first half particularly, we played, really well.
Yeah.
And it was really frustrating because I remember their equaliser was really poor.
It was it was a terrible goal.
And again, that felt like them getting that goal just took the wind out of us because we'd played so well, but we just couldn't hold out to take a lead in to half time. And then in the second half, you're right, Celtic put their foot in the ball and upped it a level, got a second goal, and that was it. They had that. We were playing at a maximum, and they had that extra gear to go up that we didn't.
Yeah, I think that's Celtic were in an incredible season, but I think it just showed you that Celtic were so far ahead. But the January window, Rangers make 2 more signings: John Terrell and Emerson Hyman, 2 young players. David, I've always been under the suspicion with Warburton that he was planning for next season. Like he didn't want to kind of. He obviously would have looked at that team and went, I really need 4 or 5 top quality players. But I think he was planning for the next season at this point, because these 2 guys, they were decent enough. I thought Hyman was actually okay, but I've always been under suspicion that Warburton just didn't get the to play at Rangers. You can't just be a tidy player. You need a lot more. You need character, and these signings did not say that to me, and I think that sums up Warburton's signings at this point.
Yeah, because memory serves me right, they were both just until the end of the season as well, and that, Emerson Hyman was all right. He did a job while he was here. John Terrell, no, no, the guy looked like he was, wanting for a syrup most of the time. we needed that was really frustrating from a fan's point of view, because we needed signings to come in and do something. And 2 young guys on loan just weren't what was required at that point. And
that was the thing as well. Like, the results don't get any better, and it leads on to this famous night at Tynecastle where I remember my dad, who had been really, I keep mentioning my dad in this episode, but he absolutely loved Mark Warburton in the first season because he was bringing this. I mean, we're recording this the night after Man City and Blacks Man United, and my dad phoned me and said that's one of the best performances he's ever seen from a football team, just how well they play football. And my dad's a huge fan of that, but he said that night, he said, Rangers can play all the good football they want, the defending is horrendous, and that was the night he says Warburton's just no got it.
Yeah, God, this was awful.
This was horrendous.
Yeah, this an absolute disaster from start to finish. Was this a night as well that he took Emerson Hyman off and he got asked about it, and he said, "Oh, we need to look after. We've got a duty to the parent club or something."
Yeah, that's right.
He got absolutely polarised for that, and rightly so, because again, to me, that just massive red flags at that point. Because although there's an element of truth for that, that's not a mindset you can have when you're at Rangers. That's fine if you're the Brentford manager, but it's not good enough for for the Rangers manager, and that's why we don't make a lot of. It's why we don't make a lot of youth signings in the January transfer window, because to what end? If we're making a loan signing in January, it's for them to come in and do a job for us for 6 months, not to not to to improve his prospects for his playing club. That's not of an interest to us. There's also an understanding of that if we make these kind of signs at the start of the season. A guy like Ryan Kent, when we first brought him in loan, obviously you understand that there could be a chance that he's here for 1 year, we never see him again, and Liverpool will have a keen eye and see what he does here. But for a January transfer signing, it needs to be, worst example in the world, but somebody like Aaron Ramsey coming in, because we're bringing him in here not to the benefit of Juventus. We're bringing him in here because we think he can do something for us for 6 months. And it was just an awful night. And even at that point, Ian Cathro is in at Hearts, and he's already, probably a bit unfairly, but he's been polarised and, bullied by large sections of the Scottish media for being the geeky wee guy with a laptop. And as much as I've, shouted against that at the time, couldn't help feel that after when the full-time whistle went, going, fuck me, we've just been beat 4-1 by the geeky wee guy with a laptop.
And that's the thing, like, as well, that I think you've hit a really interesting point that I was kind of bring up at the end. Like, when you're the Brentford manager and you say something like, we need to protect the parent club, you can get away with it because Brentford does not high expectations. And I think a lot of managers suffer from this when they go to a big club. Like, would it be fair to say, David, that maybe his budget at Rangers and his budget at Brentford wouldn't have been all that different at the time? Like, in terms of, like, I don't think Mark Warburton certainly got the budget his successor would have the summer after.
Yeah, I bet you're looking forward to talk about that one.
Yeah.
You're probably not wrong. Maybe even got a wee bit more than he would have Brentford at the time, which is depressing now, considering how they could outspend his 10, if not 100-fold. But you're right. As I say, we didn't spend a lot of money because we didn't have money to spend.
And I think that's it as well. I think that Warburton, Warburton took the job maybe the season after that, I think he would have got a lot more money. It'd been interesting to see who he brought in, because he did have this, like, he developed, like, James Tarkowski was a Warburton project that he got a lot, that Brentford got a lot of money for. Like, he did have that ability to bring through players. I just think at the time that he thought the budget he was getting, he was bringing in kind of mid-championship, like kind of high League One type players. And as well as I do, unless they're really big characters who have the big, as I say, the big game mentality, it doesn't work. And you see that like a lot of these signings didn't work. And I think that's always the thing that sticks to me with Warburton. But there's one more game to talk about in the Warburton era, a 1-1 draw over Ross County. And I remember there'd been boos at full time. And I'll be honest, I didn't think this would be the last game of the Warburton regime, but I didn't think it would get any better after that.
No, I was pretty much the same. I didn't think it was going to get any better, but I'll be honest, I probably still expected them to see out the season. At this point, I think, I don't know if a bit of hindsight there, but it certainly was a surprise when he left. I didn't expect this to be his last game, but I just felt at this point we were just marking time. I didn't see it getting any better. I said that I'm a good couple of months into thinking that this guy isn't going to be the guy to get us to where we want to go. And as you said there as well about your dad loved Warburton, so did I. And I thought it would have been great if he would have been the guy to get us to that point. But ultimately it was the same under Ali. God, if you were to pick somebody to take us to 55, you couldn't have picked anyone better than Ali McCoys. But ultimately what's good for Rangers outweighs how you feel about the individual. And this guy just wasn't the answer for Rangers. He wasn't going to take us to where we want to be. It's an interesting point you make about the money his predecessor would take, or his successor would take the next summer. I don't think either guy was the answer. Certainly Pedro.
Yeah, no, definitely.
But if Pedro was the answer, I don't know what the question was. But I'd have liked to have seen Warburton. If he had to say between the two, I'd have preferred Warburton getting the money that Pedro got.
Yeah, and I think we'll review that at the end, looking at what Warburton would have done maybe if things were different. But let's get to the 10th of February. This is a weird day for me, and I'll explain why in just a second. Mark Warburton, David Weir, head of recruitment for McParland, had left Rangers, and Graham Murray was put in charge. David, where were you when you heard this news? Because it's probably not as weird as where I was.
Oh God, I can't mind.
I was sitting in the Hydro watching Still game and getting my phone was going mental. With, I think I put it in silent and vibrate or something. I kept getting texts saying Warburton's resigned, and getting out actually during it to actually find out what was going on. And there's a lot to unpack here with what happens. One side say that they were sacked. The other side say that Warburton and Davy Weir had offered their resignation because they were going to go and take a job in Nottingham Forest. I know who I believe. I'm going to ask you as well what you think, but I'm not going to speculate what the actual story is, but I know what side I come down on.
I think he wanted a way out.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the fact that he leaves us and goes to Nottingham Forest, it's very, you know, if that's a coincidence, it's one hell of a coincidence,
Yeah.
you know. I don't know, maybe he changed his mind. But I certainly think he was looking for a way out. And maybe the board were as well, to be honest. And they were like, no, listen, if you said you're going to go, you're gone, and that's it. I think it was probably the best things for both parties at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I don't see him turning it around, or at the very least, you know, turning it around to a point to take us to where we want to go, or where we get eventually under Steven Gerrard.
Mm-hmm.
It's, you know, I very much side with the club in this one.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what happened. I think they get cold feet in what they were actually trying to do. I think kind of the weird David Weir one's weird about this, because was there a case of loyalty to Warburton maybe went over loyalty to Rangers? Because like, for example, if Warburton was to leave of his own accord, like just a wee kind of hypothetical thing, if Warburton was to resign, would it have been Weir maybe taking that job in a caretaker role as opposed to Murray? Like, that's just always one we thought I've had.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the Davy Weir thing's always been a funny one to me. Like, what actually happened to him? I'd love to ask him, but
yeah, you know, the Davy Weir part, you know, at the time hurt me more than Warburton, to be honest. You know, Davy Weir's one of my favourite Rangers players ever. For what he came and did with us an age he was absolutely incredible. He led us to 3 league titles, a European final, and a handful of cups. Just incredible. And to me, he epitomised everything good in a Rangers player. You know, I think he was almost the stereotypical Rangers player. If you were to draw or create a Rangers player, it would come out looking, sounding, and acting like Davy Weir. So yeah, that hurt. I suppose, again, with the benefit of, you know, nearly 5 years more than 5 years to reflect on it now. It's all very well saying, you know, that he doesn't leave with Warburton and he stays, takes the caretaker manager job, but I mean, that could just mean that he's out of a job anyway in 3 months.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those what ifs, but kind of closing the show, talking about this whole period, like we spoke on it earlier, like it's one of those things of we all bought into Warburton and how well he spoke, as you say. He came in, he brought a spark back, he gave us something that we'd been missing for 4 years, just this misery that we're going through, and Warburton had brought that, played some really good football. It was just you were more disappointed than anything that it just hadn't worked.
You were really disappointed, because I generally thought, you know, at the time this was going to be the guy to get us back to the top of the pile. You look back at the early days, and the football we were playing was great. You know, breath of fresh air, as we've said about 100 times. The win over Celtic in the semi-final, something that lives with me forever. One of my favourite memories watching Rangers, because it was so needed. But it was really, really disappointing how it ended, and you know how it played out, and it ended in such a bitter note as well, because this is a guy that was, you know, 6 months previously absolutely adored by the
Yeah.
Rangers support. They could do no wrong, but yeah, again, we go back to that thing about pitting him having a, his heart sinking or a pit in his stomach, whatever. You're only as good as your last result at Rangers. And I just, again, with time to reflect on it now, I just don't think he got us. He just didn't get it up here.
Do you think that was it, or do you think it was maybe a case of, if, let's say, for example, we gets 10, 12 million that summer, does he go for the same level of player? Does he try his best to kind of go to the higher, like, kind of Premier League market and maybe bring in some gems, or do you think it was just the way the club was at the time, where money wasn't what it would be later on? Like, do you think it could have been different if he had more investment his way?
Possibly. He leaves us after that Ross County game, and we're sitting a point behind second.
Mm-hmm.
We end up finishing third that season.
Yeah.
After Murray and Pedro comes in towards the end. Does it get any better that season, or does the decline just keep happening? Because I mean, it doesn't look like it's going to get any better. If he stays to the end of the season and we give him another season, and he gets the budget that Pedro did that summer, will it get better the next season? Possibly. Would we finish second? Possibly or probably. But I think there was always going to be a glass ceiling on Mark Warburton. I think second, maybe a cup or two, was always going to be the limit for Mark Warburton. I don't think he was going to be the guy to take us to a league title, to take us back to competing in Europe the way that Gerrard and Van Bronckhorst has done now. I just think it might have got a second season, might have been better than this one, but it was probably not going to get any better than second.
And on the next episode of the Rangers Journey, we will look at the successor to Mark Warburton, Pedro Caixinha, as he comes in. And very early on, we see that alarm bells are ringing, and ultimately results in the club having to go back to the drawing board and appoint a new manager who would actually turn around to be a gem. David, I want to thank you for joining me in this week's episode. It's been an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate it.
No, I've enjoyed that, mate. That was I could be looked down memory lane there.
I really enjoyed it. Thanks very much for coming on. And thank you to everyone that's tuned in. And please join us on the next part of the Rangers Journey.